right, welcome. If you're an infrastructure admin or just a highly focused learner gearing up for your certification, you are in the exact right place. This explainer is titled specifically NCP-MCI 7.5.10.1 Microsegmentation and Nutanix Flow. Today, we're going to absolutely master this section so you are fully prepared for the Nutanix Certified Professional Multi-Cloud Infrastructure exam. Now, before we jump into the deep end, let's just lay down a quick baseline with our acronyms just to make sure we're all on the same page. You're going to hear me mention AOS quite a bit. That's the Acropolis operating system, the brains running the controller virtual machines. We'll also talk a ton about AHV, the Acropolis hypervisor, which is Nutanix's native hypervisor, and finally FNs, which stands for Flow Network Security. So get comfortable, grab a notepad, and let's get you ready to crush this section of the exam. Okay, let's dive into this. Here is our roadmap for today. First, we'll cover why microsegmentation matters. Second, flow categories and policies. Third, real-world flow examples. Fourth, common exam traps. And fifth, key facts to memorize. Section 1, why microsegmentation matters. Shifting to workload-centric security. Okay, to really get this, we got to talk about why the old way of doing things, those legacy data center security models, just don't cut it anymore. We need to understand why Nutanix actually built Flow to shift us toward a more workload-centric posture. At the very heart of Flow network security is a philosophical foundation you absolutely must know for the exam, and that's zero trust. Now, zero trust is exactly what it sounds like. It's a security concept centered on the idea that organizations shouldn't automatically trust anything, whether it's inside or outside their perimeters. Instead, you have to verify anything and everything trying to connect to your systems before granting access. You know, back in the day, if you were inside the firewall, you were trusted. It was like a castle with a moat. But under zero trust, which is exactly what Flow enables, we essentially assume the network is already compromised. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how zero trust actually dictates our day-to-day operations. Look over on the left. That's the traditional block list model. This model automatically approves all traffic. So as an admin, you're basically playing a never-ending game of whack-a-mole, right? You have to explicitly write rules to reject the bad traffic as you find it. But on the right, we have the allowlist model, which is also known as the least privilege model. This one automatically denies everything right out of the gate. You have to explicitly define exactly what is allowed to communicate. For the NCP-MCI exam, I want you to permanently cement this in your mind. Nutanix Flow Network Security operates entirely on this strict allowlist least privilege model. Bottom line, if you don't explicitly allow the traffic, Flow just drops it, no exceptions. And this brings us to a really monumental shift in how we manage the entire data center. Network-centric security, which you see on the left, requires this super intimate knowledge of VLANs and subnets, and honestly, a huge reliance on siloed network security teams just to configure internal hardware firewalls. It's a lot of red tape. But Nutanix Flow uses the workload-centric security model over on the right. Flow inspects traffic within the data center directly at the virtual machine level. It's completely network agnostic. This is huge because it means you, the virtualization team, can implement and manage east-west security policies without ever having to submit a help desk ticket to the networking team to go mess with VLANs. It literally eliminates the need for those clunky extra internal data center firewalls. It's just a totally different ballgame. Section 2. Flow categories and policies. The building blocks of microsegmentation. All right, now that we understand the why, let's transition to the core mechanics of how Flow actually identifies and targets VMs. If you memorize only one single sentence from this entire explainer, let it be this exact quote. Security policies are applied to categories, a logical grouping of VMs, and not to the VMs themselves. I'm going to say that one more time for emphasis. You do not apply a policy to a VM, you apply it to a category. For you admins out there, recognize that this is a massive, massive paradigm shift from traditional firewalls where you're constantly writing rules based on specific IP addresses or MAC addresses. So you might be wondering, what exactly is a category? Well, in Nutanix terminology, a category is really just a key value tag. Let's say your key is app and your value is database, or maybe the key is environment and the value is production. You take these tags and you assign them to your entities. Now, the documentation also brings up something called a category set. And a category set is honestly just a collection of these categories evaluated with an AND operation. So if a VM is tagged with environment production and app database, it falls into that specific category set. And any policies targeting that set, they'll instantly apply to that VM. It's a really elegant way to organize things. So the crucial point is understanding this exact workflow for the exam. Let's walk through it methodically. Step 1. You create your category, your key value tag, right inside Prism Central. Step 2. You assign that category to your virtual machine. Step 3. You apply a security policy. But remember, you're not applying it to the VM, you're applying it to the category itself. And because the policy targets the tag, the actual IP address of the VM is completely irrelevant to the Flow rules engine. It just doesn't matter. Section 3. Real-world Flow examples. Seen microsegmentation in action. Let's move into the practical application phase to really ground this theory in real data center scenarios that you're definitely going to see on the test. And this brilliantly illustrates our first concrete example, application ring fencing. So when you want to secure a specific multi-tier application, by strictly specifying its allowed traffic sources and destinations, you use what's called an application security policy. Ring fencing basically means drawing a secure, invisible boundary around an application. For instance, you could set it up so that your web tier can only talk to your app tier, and your app tier can only talk to your database tier. But, and here's the kicker, the web tier absolutely cannot jump straight to the database. And all of this isolation is done seamlessly using those categories we just talked about. Now, for our second concrete example, let's talk about handling auto-scaling workloads. Imagine it's Black Friday, right? Your e-commerce web tier suddenly needs to scale from, say, 3 VMs all the way up to 30 VMs just to handle the traffic spike. Because Flow policies are entirely category-based, when those 27 new VMs spin up, your automation script automatically assigns them the app web category tag. And the magical part? The very moment that tag is applied, the Flow traffic policies apply instantly, zero administrative intervention required. You don't have to scramble to manually add 27 new IP addresses to some legacy firewall rule. The environment scales, and it scales securely, by default. Section 4. Common exam traps. Don't get tricked on the test. All right, let's put on our instructor hats for a minute. You know, exam writers absolutely love to test edge cases and exact limitations. They want to see if you can spot a trick question. So, here's a classic scenario. I'm going to read it, and I want you to genuinely answer it in your head. Ready? Can you apply a Nutanix Flow security policy to a VM running on an ESXi or Hyper-V cluster managed by Nutanix? Think about that for a second. Well, if you thought no, you are exactly right. We can pull this directly from the official documentation. Nutanix Flow supports only the AHV hypervisor, period. Security policies absolutely cannot be applied to VMs running on other hypervisors. This is a hard limitation and a highly testable fact. Flow is a native, built-in benefit of using AHV. So do yourself a favor and permanently anchor that fact in your memory. Let's do another mock exam scenario. What if a virtual machine changes its IP address? Or, say, it live migrates and moves to a completely different subnet somewhere else in your data center? Do you need to go in and update the Flow policy to maintain your security posture? Once again, the answer is a definitive no. Remember what we learned? Because Flow is workload-centric and tied completely to logical categories rather than IPs, the security policy seamlessly moves right along with the VM, totally regardless of any underlying network changes. The tag stays the same, so the security stays the same. Simple as that. Let's move to and see how this builds into Section 5, Key Facts to Memorize, your exam prep checklist. Okay, rapid fire time. Let's consolidate everything you absolutely must remember for Section 10.1 of the exam. If you're an infrastructure admin, you might want to take a screenshot or jot these down right now. First, Flow requires the AHV hypervisor exclusively. No ESXi, no Hyper-V. Second, it operates on a zero-trust, allow-list, least privilege model, meaning it denies everything by default. Third, policies are applied to categories, those key value tags, never to individual VMs and never ever to IP addresses. And finally, because it relies on those tags, it scales dynamically without any administrative intervention when your workloads grow or shrink. Honestly, if you fully grasp these 4 bullet points, you understand the core of Nutanix Flow network security. So to wrap things up, I want to leave you with a bit of a provocative thought. Beyond just passing the exam, how are you actually going to shift your data center's mindset from legacy network VLANs to workload-centric microsegmentation? Because implementing a true zero-trust architecture, that requires a culture shift just as much as a technology shift. Thank you so much for studying with me today. Best of luck on your NCP-MCI 7.5 exam. You're going to do great, and I will see you in the next explainer.